Welcome to conversation number 5 of the Corey Shepherd podcast. Welcome back to everybody who's been listening. Welcome to all the new listeners. Now, for everybody who's been listening before, you all should remember Neola Zama. That was an episode we did before. Neola is a licensed therapist, and it was a pretty popular episode. People really enjoyed it. And what we spoke about was our own journeys seeking help and seeking therapy. It was really some good stories, and it's good to know that I wasn't alone when I heard some of the stories about Neola's path to therapy, even as a therapist. And what she committed at the time to come back on and discuss some more issues around mental health and well-being and self-care in Trinidad and Tobago. And she's back, so I'm happy to have her back. She's agreed to come on. And the first topic we're going to talk about is domestic violence. And we really decided that we're going to start talking a little bit more about issues that people tend to sweep under the rug in our society. And they tend to become very big conversations when it's too late, when we're looking at a headline and when we're looking at people mourning and so on. So what we decided is let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Let's make our own headlines and keep it at the forefront so that hopefully as the conversation continues to happen, we will get past it to a point in the society where we're seeing different types of headlines and we're no longer as worried about that as we usually are. So before we get Neola on the line, let me just say that the domestic violence hotline, the number is 800-SAVE, which is 800-7233. So if for any reason you're in a situation where there's domestic violence, please call the hotlines. And the goal here is really to shed some light on it. I'm going to ask the questions, and let me apologize up front for any questions I ask or stories that I share that might come across as insensitive. The goal is really to help and to keep the conversation on the front burner. So let me get Neola on the line.
Hi, Corey.
Neola Zama.
Mr. Shepherd.
How are you?
How has it been? It's 2020.
It's 2020. I feel like since 2019.
Yeah, that should say it all.
Yeah, it's true. It feel like I talked to you last time was 2019. It feel like a long time ago.
So we're almost in 2021.
That's where the hope coming from, It feeling like if we could survive this, we could survive anything. I never thought we'd see the end of this year.
And that's the thing about resilience, right? Is like you make it through the worst thing.
That's true.
And then it could turn into this thing where you say, look what I lived through. And now I have all these amazing strengths that I didn't know I had. So, man, 2021, I doing this,
It's true. If you could make it through bars being closed this long, you make it through anything, yes?
Yeah.
Sorry to all the bar owners.
To sit in a restaurant.
Yeah, boy. That might be the hardest restriction for me of all of them.
Yeah.
That not being able to sit, because I guess like me thinking about work for me, like I work in South, live in Chaguanas. But half the time I drive down the highway, I end up stopping off in Maria's and work from there for the day or a Starbucks or something.
Yes.
So it's real odd, boy.
You said that and my mind just thought, remember those good old days when you could call your friends and you could say, right, Sunday, 9 o'clock, Maria, save me a seat.
Yeah.
And now it's like this, oh my gosh, wow.
It's real odd, boy. And even going Maria's now is sad because now I see all the people who work in there. I just like, I need to take this coffee somewhere. Like this week, I literally just sat in my car outside Maria's. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I sat in my car in the car park with the Maria's food and I just eat and watch the store. I was like,
gazing longingly into the window. Yeah.
But we have a little freedom. We have some, I guess you could eat, but you can't drink, I suppose. You could drink non-alcoholic, is what they said.
Right. And of course, well, I was going to make a naughty joke about thermoses, but we obey the law. And we don't put any kind of substance into thermoses to go anywhere.
For sure. Especially cinema.
Yeah. You wouldn't see me doing that.
Yeah, anytime you see Neola, just walk with your little refill glass and ask her for a little sip out of wine that thermos. Let her top you up. It should be good.
I'm hydrating, guys.
I'm sure. It's like a partner of mine recently who got married and he gave us, as the groomsmen, what is called a bridal party? Groom's party? Whatever the party is.
Must be, yeah.
And he gave us these little flasks as the wedding gift, as a signature thing with him and his wife's signature on it and thing. It was a really nice token.
Right.
But you know that mash up all these speeches and things, because from the time we get that was full from the beginning of the wedding till the end.
Of course.
Yeah, so maybe I could pull that back out and see if
it's time to pull it out. Dust it out. Yeah. And put some water in there.
Oh man, let's move on. If it's water, we need to move on to the next thing. So listen, I want to reach back out because the first episode we did was well received. I feel so long ago, I can't remember what we talked about.
But therapy, horror stories about therapy.
Like getting started.
A good therapist, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it was a good episode for me personally because I guess several times during this conversation, you said some things that had me like thinking. And I guess it was the same for a lot of people who listen. Like,
and for me also, yeah.
That's good. One person's feedback was that, boy, it sounded like at times you was in therapy and then she was in therapy. And then, so I guess that makes for a good conversation.
Yes. I enjoyed it so much.
Good. Same here. So what I'm thinking we would do, and this is the first of them, is to start expanding our conversation or going in some other areas around mental health, particularly in Trinidad. Trinidad is my place, yours too.
Of course, yeah.
So I think there are some difficult conversations that we tend to, as a society, I feel like we avoid having them.
Right.
And if so much people like listening to me and you talk better, we talk about the difficult things and see if we could get some people to listen to that too.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Good. So let's go into one of the more difficult ones. And it's another area for me where I have trouble understanding. So I'm probably going to ask a lot of questions and
of course
see how it goes. So domestic violence.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one,
that's
right?
It. That's almost a Pandora's box, right?
It is.
And I did not know. So it's a funny thing, so I grew up in an abusive home. But also the first 8 years of my life was spent with my dad's extended family. So it's that whole very old school East Indian upbringing where you are with your grandparents and your parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, everybody. And I didn't know that what I was witnessing from my grandfather to my grandmother was domestic violence.
Oh.
I did not know. I didn't. So we moved out, after 8.5 years of living there. And one day when I was about 16, I was already in secondary school. My dad came home, burst through the door, and looks at me and says, "We're going by your grandparents now," which has never happened before or since. So I said, okay. So I jumped in the van, got up there, and there's my grandfather drunk, shoving and pulling my grandmother, who was crippled in one leg.
God.
And I was in total shock. You heard growing up what happens between them, and we never really saw it.
Oh, yeah.
And so my dad says to my grandfather, who was a farmer, so he had a licensed shotgun at home under the bed. He says to him, "Why don't you pick on somebody your own size?"
So this is his father or this is his father now?
This is his father now.
Wow.
And so he jumps in between my grandparents and my grandfather reaches out to strike him. And I don't know how I ended up between them, and I pushed my granddad off.
Oh.
And he then pushed me down the stairs. So it settled down because my granddad realized dad wasn't going to back down. And so dad says to his mom, "Come, you'll stay with us." And she was like, "No, I can't leave him."
Oh, God.
And Corey, 16 years old, I just froze on the spot and my head started spinning and I just kept thinking, why would you stay?
All right.
You're terrified. I can see you're terrified. Granddad is drunk. He has a loaded shotgun under the bed. Why, And fast forward how many years, because I'm horrible with numbers. So fast forward to I'm 27 and I'm in UE. Finishing up my master's. And actually, even before that, I was 25. And Dr. Linda Hadid, who was one of my lecturers and a leader in the field of domestic violence locally, she says to me, because I'm in one of her classes, she said, "Would you like to be my research assistant? It's a paid position. It's a lot of research, and I think you will love it." So I jumped at the chance because it's something, it looks good on your resume. And I thought, I probably would have a knack for this thing. And so the topic she was looking at was, why do women stay in abusive relationships? And so I just immediately flashed back to 16 years old. And I thought, am I going to find out the answer now? And I did. And let me tell you, those months being her research assistant, it was one of the most difficult patches of my life that I've had to walk through. Because how the research is you'd go through interviews with women in abusive relationships, and really long interviews asking questions like, when did the violence start? What was the worst thing? Describe it in detail. Why do you stay? Why do you still love your partner? And some of the answers that these women would give for the kinds of violence that they had endured would turn your stomach. And then to get down there to the end of the interview and to read some of the reasons why they were staying, it was so painful. And fast forward again, so I'm almost 41 now. And when you look around, and you read these stories in the paper, you listen to people talk and you see the news, I realize that not much has changed in terms of our awareness of how abusive relationships work and why victims stay. Victims aren't women only, of course, they're men as well. But the reasons, I imagine some of them would be similar. And I'm really glad that we'll be getting into this today, because asking why a person would stay is such a valid question, because there are many legitimate reasons.
I could imagine. But let me ask you this. The people you were interviewing in those for you.
I didn't do the interviews, so Dr. Hattie would have done the interviews, and she gave me all of the transcripts. Yeah. So you would have to code them, like add a code for love, add a code for finance, add a code for fear. Yeah. And most of them had not actually left the relationship. They were still in the relationship, yeah. She had to pay for interviews, actually. Yeah, they didn't want to talk.
Yeah, they don't want to talk. Well, that might be a good place to start, because that's one of my main questions. Like, I look and I've seen people who I know in abusive relationships, all different types of abuse too. And my question is always like, why not just go? And I guess as I get older, I'm starting to realize that question could be real naive if you're on the outside looking in. But from a professional standpoint, what would you say would be some of the reasons that women choose to stay?
It's so many different things. So let's start first in the brain and the body, right? Now, when you end up with someone who's an abusive partner, you never start off being abused. Actually, it's the opposite. Usually the person is so very charming, which is one of the hallmarks of abusive persons, because to outsiders, they're charming, and that's part of the strategy to keep you isolated. So that when you start talking about the abuse, the general response is, no, not him. He is the nicest guy, or she is so funny, and she's so religious, right? So it starts off with something we call love bombing. Quite often you are just showered and bombarded with love. It's romance and flowers and jewelry, and I love you is very, very early. Now, I actually, when people come to me and they've just, started in a relationship in therapy, or even with a friend, if they start telling me things like that, and it's like a month in, my radar goes up instantly. Because that's not very healthy or common in healthy relationships. So you start off falling in love with this person. Let's say you get married or you're living together, right? And then the controlling and violent behavior starts creeping in very subtly. Like, it might start off with something as innocuous as, how come you were on the phone for so long? Or how come you took that call downstairs? And of course, no red flag goes off, because you're madly in love with this person. They're the best thing ever, and it's such a tiny question, so you defend it. Yeah, I mean, what's the big thing? Well, you defend it. Well, it was a call for work, and I just wanted privacy. And then the second time, the response might be, how come you want privacy from me? We could share everything. And over time, it creeps in where your red flags don't go off anymore because the brain is not registering this as danger, because this is a person you love, and love is supposed to be safe. So the radar doesn't really go off.
Okay.
Now, another reason the radar couldn't go off, which is what had happened to me because I grew up in an abusive home, is that the radar is broken and it's upside down, so that your radar, because you've become so accustomed to an abusive home, your radar actually reads dangerous relationships as safe, and so you move towards them. Right.
Well, that I feel like I've seen, because there are some people I've seen who were in, I would naively just say, well, leave, you know what I mean? And even when they leave, the other relationship and anyone after that, and it all seems to end up the same way. And it's so, and I wonder if, in Trinidad, they say, we call it law of attraction, but in Trinidad, they kind of say, they follow it, it's your luck, you know what I mean?
On the deep level, if you think of the brain and the subconscious, it's really that it feels like home. And nobody leaves a place where they feel at home. In fact, Corey, not you or not me. It feels like home, so you stay because it's comfortable and you kind of know what's coming next.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's very familiar.
I guess
and
familiarity
the other thing
too. It just feels like what home should be.
This is the side that we don't know at all. Most of us. So let's talk about gambling for a minute. The brain on gambling is the same as the brain in an abusive relationship. So you're there in the casino, right? And you're spinning or doing the thing with the lever, I don't know the slot machines. Yeah. So now, if you're gonna Tuesday and you spin 10 times, you may get lucky once. You go on Wednesday, you spend 10 times, you don't get anything at all. Right. So you go on Thursday with more money, you spend 20 times and you get lucky once. Now, what's happening is the brain cannot read when the reward is coming because it's unpredictable. So what happens to the brain is something called intermittent positive reinforcement. So the intermittent means it's not regular, it's just popping up at random times. And the positive reinforcement means you've been rewarded. So what the brain knows is, if I stay with this, I'm eventually going to be rewarded. I just don't know when that prize is coming, and I'm spending all this money in the meantime going broke. So the reward center of the brain lights up every time you win $50, and that's the prize, and it keeps you coming back, because although you don't know when the reward is going to come, you know it will come. Exactly.
Yeah, they say that's what creates the addiction, that loop of not knowing when the reward will come. No, I was thinking, as the analogy is powerful, because there was something I read that's so similar to that. I was saying that they examined the brain of gamblers.
Right.
And what they found is exactly what you described. And in addition to that, as somebody who's a non-gambler, because gambling is kind of polarizing. They have people who love it and addicted to it, and some people who wouldn't do it at all.
Right.
And they were saying that the people who are non-gamblers, the reward center only goes off in their brain when they win something, right? Which sounds normal to me.
Yeah.
But what they were saying is that in the gambler's brain, the reward center in the brain goes off when they almost won.
Yeah.
So somebody who's a non-gambler says, if I win, I'm happy. If I lose, I'm sad. But for the gambler, there's 3 states. There's win, lost, and almost won. So that the person feels good when they win, and they feel good when they almost win. Now, it's still a loss, eh? But for the gambler, they're seeing it as you're almost getting there. So
it's not even a loss; it's an investment.
That's right. And
so let me invest 50,000 more, because you know what, I could win this time.
That's right. When you get something, it come close. You get that one little cherry away from the 3 cherries. You say, all right, well, let me put in a little more. And it's so related to what you said in the beginning, because I guess if when you go into a relationship, who don't want to be showered with all that love and all that attention?
Of course,
So you're saying here that feeling of that reward you got initially, no matter how bad things might get, I guess you have that to hold on to as a reward that may come back at some point.
And it's hopeful, because remember, the person isn't abusive all the time. In fact, in the very early stages, and the early stage can last for years, where after the abuse, there's what we call a honeymoon phase. So it's the, I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. I bring you flowers. There's a lot of lovemaking happening. And the reason I mention that is because, and there's a book as well I'll mention coming down here to the end that explains this so well, is that sexual relationships in abusive marriages are more intense because of the addiction cycle that the brain undergoes.
I'm sure.
So it lights up that reward center so much that you actually feel as if you're on a drug and you're high. And remember, this is the person you love, right? So when they say sorry, it will never happen again, you want to believe it.
Yeah, you want to believe it, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. And years later, after the honeymoon phase gets smaller and smaller, because that's how it works, you find yourself locked into possibly a very violent pattern.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so there's your assessment is broken, the radar is broken, there's the love bombing, there's the honeymoon phase. Now, bear in mind, there's something called, and I hate the name, but I need to say it because if you go to Google, that's what you'll find. It's something called battered woman syndrome. It should not really be battered, it should be victim. And what happens is after a time of being abused, especially emotionally and mentally abused, the brain loses the ability to think clearly and critically. I've actually had victims of domestic violence in session with me who would forget the beginning of the session halfway through because they have lost all ability to recall information, to think critically, to think analytically, because when you've been gaslighted long enough, you begin to doubt your own reality and you don't trust your own perception. So it would be 10:30, session started 10 o'clock, and my client, one in particular, she would say, I'm sorry, I don't remember anything that you said.
Wow.
And over time, a victim's ability to think clearly is systematically broken down. Now, when the brain is in pain as well, the executive function, which is responsible for decision making, it actually goes offline.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and the back of the brain, which is called the limbic system, that's the one that comes online, and that's the one that's purely concerned with pain relief and fear. So we often stand on the outside when we ourselves are in peaceful, loving relationships, looking at this person in this violent relationship, and we think, but what are you thinking? And the truth is they can't. They're not really. They're just thinking about survival from day to day to day.
Of course.
So it's hard for the brain to latch on to, systematically planning things to get out. Even when victims try to get out, I've had so many people come into therapy and say, look, I tried to leave. I went by my parents. They sent me back home. My mom said a woman's place is with her husband. My imam said, wives have to be submissive. My priest said, wives submit to your husbands.
Yeah.
I had one victim come to me. She tried, quote unquote, counseling from someone. And he told her, listen, all you have to do is get a tattoo on your back and buy sexy underwear.
Sorry, what? Come again? I think I missed that. What?
No, you didn't miss it. He said, all you need to do is get a tattoo on your back and wear some sexy underwear. And he pressured her into going straight back home.
No, but wait, this is not counselor telling her this. This is somebody who giving her.
That's why I said quote unquote, because I mean, really.
This ain't no licensed person saying this, right? So
no,
couldn't be.
Funny enough, Corey, somebody called me the other day for a session, and she told me that she went to a degreed clinical licensed counselor for abuse in her relationship. And he said to her, you don't worry, you bring him in and I could fix this in 2 or 3 sessions. And I almost fell off my chair because, the first rule of thumb is you don't actually see the abusive person and the victim together.
Really?
It's never done because the abusive partner doesn't take responsibility for their behavior and blames the victim. And so the victim is actually re-traumatized repeatedly in the session. So you always do that separate until the abusive party gets therapy themselves.
Got you.
And he said, he's going to fix the whole thing in 3 sessions. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So it's a
hell of a thing to tell somebody too, though, because if I go
with a straight face.
Well, listen, based on what we talked about in the last conversation, I couldn't imagine I found it so hard to say anything to a therapist. If you know my story.
Yeah.
That if I had opened my mouth and say something that I was struggling with, and you flippantly say, just bring her man, we go. That might be the enemy in therapy, honestly.
Yeah,
As a hell
and
of a
we
thing
would
to
have
tell
never
somebody.
had the podcast, and none of this would have happened.
Exactly. That was not happening because I just find it so beyond everything else. I mean, I didn't know about the professional parts of seeing them separately, but it just sounded like invalid, like paying attention to.
Total invalidation, which is what you were getting at home anyway.
Oh my God, yeah.
So you've just been abused by the therapist.
My God.
And all that courage that you worked up to go for session is now gone.
Yeah, for sure. There's no way that and we're not continuing. I would be, especially if like I don't know if this is right with. I saw therapy as such an escape. I used to do that 1-on-1, make sure that I get it done at the end of every week, just so I could get to my weekend and be relaxed enough,
Right.
So I can't imagine going somewhere like that and hearing something like,
it's so deflating.
It would be. I think it would be.
And there's so much pressure from people when we leave or when we try to leave. It's defeating. And by the time you get really entrenched into an abusive relationship, you don't have much support left because victims are often isolated.
I could see why. Because I've had situations before where I myself pick up the attitude of, listen, I talk to you about this. I try to help you with this. If you keep going back there, I washing my hands of that. I don't want no part. Yeah, I done as an outsider.
And then you can't go out because, of course, the abusive person has to keep an eye on you.
Oh my God.
Control where you're going, who you're speaking to, your friendships. They say lovely things like, well, all we need is each other. I'm here. I could be everything to you. And again, it's so romantic. And in the beginning, you're blinded by love.
Yeah.
And then it gets so entrenched that years pass and you realize I don't have many people now that I can reach out to. And the few I reach out to are telling me to stay. So what is the victim to do?
And that's like, I'm glad you explained that because it's something that I always wondered about. Like, I know people personally who have been abusive, like repetitively in relationships.
Right.
And I mean, some of them move on and they at least from my knowledge, did not like that anymore. Right. But I always used to, as a young fella growing up, I was always hanging around older guys, and I used to be talking to them. I was like, "What's going on with you? Why you had a hit? What is this?" I was always trying to figure out like what that woman could do. So, but something you said is so true because I also felt like with them, I never was any kind of love them was in it where it's so.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
so intense.
It's intense. That's a good word.
And they call it passion.
I guess.
Yeah, that's what they call passion. Mm-hmm. And then when you ask them to give examples, you start hearing all these instances of heated arguments. She's breaking things.
Yeah.
He is screaming. Somebody's driving off at top speed.
Yes.
Right? And then, of course, the makeup and the sex after, and it's intense. And girl, you will believe my toes were curling up, all kind of things.
Yeah.
And then in your head, you realize you've just checked off most of the traits of an abusive relationship.
Well, I used to think now that when I look from the outside at these relationships, of course, they, like you said, degenerate into abusive and a hostile relationship eventually. But it started to make me as a man, I started to wonder, but something must be wrong with me because I never fall in love with nobody in no week and no month.
Like that.
No, because it's like one case in particular, I remember a guy who he would almost like the same time he tell you about the woman, he done telling you he in love and he buy a ring and it's like a lot of expensive gifts up front and
asking her to move in and
moving in one time. That is exactly you have the checklist, It's like the moving.
It's always fast. Come work for me.
That's right. You've been watching. You've been looking at myself.
So I had a boyfriend like that. Of course, I didn't know he was abusive.
Right.
And it was these emerald necklaces and ruby rings. And I had a good job and everything.
Right.
And he's like, no, come work for me. And, we'll pay your salary and I'll pay your car loan. And this alarm just went off in my head. And I thought, wait, hang on. You will be paying my salary? So what happened? Well, what happened if we fall out here?
If you get it, I said.
Yeah, that's the end of it. And, he turned out to be so controlling and abusive.
So you saw the signs. So then, at that point, it's not like you saw the signs and get out?
I saw the signs, but I didn't get out until it got pretty bad.
Gotcha.
It took him telling me he's going to hit me and I would love it.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, he said that to me. And he was dropping me home. I'll never forget it. So I used to live in Penal and we were passing through the M2 Ring Road.
Right.
And at that time, the cane was high and there weren't streetlights or anything, you know. And he was speeding around the corners. And with my seatbelt on, I kept like being flung left to right in the car because I was breaking up with him then. And I just kept thinking, this man is going to kill me. I will die. And I just kept praying, please let me reach home. Please let me reach home. And obviously I got home and he texted me like nothing a few days later. I hope you're good. Ready to go for counseling now.
What?
And I was like, bro. And, you know, it's frightening to think there are many people who would actually go back.
No, I think it's real. And I mean, I'm glad that you described it in that way because I'm sure that anybody who listening to this, because as somebody on the outside looking in, it's such a clear path to the same end. Because
it seems so clear, yeah.
Why do all these... everybody I know who was abusive to women or is abusive to women have a problem speeding? I don't know what it is. Why you always drive so fast when they get vexed?
Yeah.
Is it
like they
problem?
Control or, you know, you're frightening the person, I suppose.
That would work, yeah, I suppose.
And you know, that finances thing is a huge reason as well. And now abuse really touches all people from all economic spheres. So economic abuse and financial abuse doesn't happen in every relationship because you really do have different types of abuse. But one of the big reasons that women stay, especially women who are homemakers, is that the abusive partner is the source of all the funds.
Right. Oh, so they have power over your control.
They have power, yeah. And especially if you have children, how am I going to feed my child? How am I going to send them to school? You know, a lot of spouses who've exited abusive relationships say to me, I'm so terrified still because there's the custody going on. What if they apply for full custody? I've had abusive persons beat their spouses and then run to the police station and say, I've just been beaten.
The man?
The man, yeah. I've just been beaten. And months later, you realize they were actually building a case to take the children away to say that the wife was abusive, yeah. And these are things that they really hold over women's heads. You'll never see the children again. Or if you leave, I'll kill myself and then my child. This happened to me working in an EAP. The woman came back into the session after it finished. She rushed through the door and she told me, he just said in the waiting room, he's going to kill me and my child when we get home.
There's a thing that I saw over the years too, where men who in abusive relationships, when the woman tried to leave, they threaten to kill themselves.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know if that is enough for a woman. I can't put myself in her shoes, but Neola, to be honest, if you tell me you're going to kill yourself, you got to work out, I ain't coming back in. If I make up my mind, I leave, and you could, I don't see what you as a woman could tell me that you're going to do to yourself. But I suppose it's a whole different ball game for a man.
You know, I've never heard of, and again, I'm choosing my words carefully. I'm saying I never heard of it. I'm not saying it's never happened. I have never seen one partner leave and the abusive person kill themselves when the person has left. What I have seen is they kill the victim and then they kill themselves.
Now, I see that before, yes, to be honest. A sad thing, a partner of mine, he's one of the most liberal people I know in terms of things that he talks about and stuff. But that's the hardest thing for him to talk about. He said that he was in a situation like that. Well, I know the person too, sadly. And she threatened and she come good.
Yeah.
But it was again, the relationship was abusive. I know him. He's a man, and you said it earlier in a way your grandfather was concerned. When he drink, he's a whole different person. He is the most cool, relaxed guy you will ever talk to. But I don't know, boy, when he drink, is a different person you see. And you know what happens among men too, like among friends. There are people who you as a partner, you moving with somebody all the time and they're cool and I know you and you're all in the relationship and everything.
Right.
And I am all shocked to hear there was abuse.
Yes.
Because when you are wrong, they're so cool and loving and everything calm.
They're the nicest people.
That's what's happening.
And this is such a myth. So as the conversation goes on, we'll be touching on myths as well.
Right.
Because the myth is very popular. They're not really abusive, it's just when they're angry or they're drunk. So they have an alcohol problem or they have an anger problem. But here's the thing. If they've had an anger problem, they would be abusing everybody else in Trinidad and Tobago.
You have a point there.
Right? When you get the wrong chicken in KFC, the Pennywise girl who talking back to you, the person who just cut in front of you by the light.
I suppose.
And they're not abusive to everyone. In fact, people will be surprised to hear that they're abusing someone at home. So they choose very carefully who to abuse, and they disguise it as, I have an anger problem. But the problem that they have is one of control. It's not with alcohol or anger.
Right.
Yeah? They could go to 100 anger management classes. You've not addressed the control.
So how do you then, like that therapist, I know it's not what he was suggesting in terms of 3 sessions, but if I was to find myself in a situation where when I drink, I get abusive.
Right.
What help do I get? How does that work then from that standpoint?
So the very first thing is if you want the help and if you're committed to changing.
Right.
And it's really hard work to change those thought patterns, and it's different thought patterns, right? But they all come back to control. So a thought pattern could be, I have control of my partner's mind, or I have control over her thoughts, her dress, her body, her space, her friends. So you'd find, you may get to be the worst person ever when you drink, but you never engage in financial abuse.
Right.
And so you don't touch her bank account or do things like give her an allowance. And then if she crosses the allowance, she has to beg for money. It could be that you're controlling, and then when you drink, all barriers are dropped. So men who are abusive should seek help from a male counselor, and women who are abusive should seek help from a female counselor. And we touched on this a little bit before, but it's about the power dynamic when relating to someone of your own sex. So I would not see an abusive male also for safety purposes, because I've had abusive men blow up at me in session when I used to do session face-to-face with men.
Right.
And I've been trapped in the office with my back against the wall and just hoping that somebody would walk on the corridor and knock on the door.
Wait, so you're a therapist at this point, so what they blowing up at you for?
So they would say something that I might confront.
Oh, okay, I suppose.
Right? Or start justifying, well, I choked her because.
Jesus Christ.
And I would say, well, there's really no reason to choke someone, because choking is a form of violence where you can die 2 or 3 days after because you stifled to death. Right? And most times, which is a mistake because I shouldn't have been seeing them anyway. I was a young therapist. Most times, abusive people do not take responsibility for their behavior, which is why I'm saying if that's a problem you have to own responsibility for your behavior and really commit to doing the long-term work that it takes to unravel abusive tendencies.
Yeah, you should probably do that on your own too, I think.
Of course. Yeah.
Don't be with nobody while you're trying to work things out.
Not with the victim, no. Those are your issues. And you see the temptation when the victim is in session with you is you start blaming again and deflecting onto the other person.
I could imagine.
That's your work one-on-one. And of course, on the side, while you're doing that, you should absolutely get help to treat the abuse of alcohol if that's a problem. But again, you can be sober and abusive.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about this is from what I see, there's nobody I know who was abusive. And whether alcohol was in play or not, when you're sober, it was coming too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, as a man too, you because it's a funny thing in this country. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but you're hesitant to get involved in people's business. So if I dare, I'm not gonna let nobody hit no woman. It could be that might be my downfall. If I see a strange man hitting a woman, I probably go and get involved, and that might be the enemy, because injustice is real triggering for me.
Oh yeah.
So I'll get in between, and I mean, hopefully it end well. But most times you're not there. You know,
Right.
in anybody relationship, you're not there, you're not there all the time. So as a man, you might talk to your partner, you might tell him, boy, why you doing this? But I feel if you tell me once, it must happen 10 times. I just not there and I don't know. Right. But it's like, how do you intervene? Or if you intervene or anything like that, what should be done as non-professionals are talking about?
You know, I'm a big fan of calling the police.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. I would have never done that.
How come? Is it that you wouldn't have done it then or you wouldn't do it now?
That's a good question. If I see my neighbors now, I don't know. That's a real good question. I don't trust the police, so I might be the wrong person to tell this.
Yeah. I've had terrible experiences with them as well.
Yeah, I mightn't. I don't know. And I definitely, back in the day, if our partner that wasn't happening. But as I hear what you say, I mean, it's probably the right thing to do.
There are different scenarios, right? I do think the climate has changed where I think a lot of police stations are taking reports of domestic violence a bit more serious than they would have in the past.
Right.
So when I was this young counselor, in the same situation where the wife rushed into my office and she said, he's threatening to kill us when we go home. So I was working in Point-a-Pay, so I called the closest police station, which was Marabella, and I told them what was going to happen. And they said, well, you can't call us. You have to call the police station where the people live. So they lived in Shogunas. So I called Shogunas police station, where I was thoroughly verbally abused. And the police asked me, what do I expect them to do? Because that's the people in their business. And then they hung up.
What?
So then I called back Marabella and told them I wasn't getting help from the Shogunas station. And they said, we cannot deal with that. You really have to call them. Called back Shogunas, said, listen, this man is dead serious and he's going to kill all of them when they get home. And I gave the address. Mm-hmm. So they hung up and they're writing my notes. And then somebody else calls back and starts to say they're going to put me on the papers because I waited too long to make the reports. And I was like, wait, hang on, because it took me an hour to make all the phone calls, yeah.
When you say somebody, like who from the police station?
So it sounded to me like somebody in authority. Mm. And what I suspect is that some shift had changed. Somebody saw something undone and decided to call and blame me for it.
Wow.
And now by that time, Corey, my clients had left. Because we didn't have a security guard upstairs and I couldn't physically hold the person back.
Of course, yeah, you could do.
So they left and here's the police telling me they're going to put me on the papers if they get to the house and anything goes wrong. And I was like, yeah, I've been calling for an hour though.
Yeah, and that's sad because the victim get lost. Well, the potential victim get lost in this whole discussion. They forget about
the whole mess. Yeah. And the whole mess, yeah. But because of the narrative and the news and COVID sending up domestic violence statistics through the roof, and so many women having been killed over the past few years, I have seen a change in the police response. Now, there are different scenarios, right? So if, let's say, your partner has been threatening to kill themselves and you're on your way out and you've had enough of the abuse and you're terrified for your life, leave and call the police as soon as you're a safe distance away and let them know this person is threatening suicide and I just left them and they're in the house.
Right, safeguard yourself.
Yeah, send the police there, but safeguard yourself. If you're seeing a man and a woman physically fighting, always make sure that you're safe first, please.
Yeah.
Get to safety and call the police. If one of the partners is coming to confide in you, I guess we could get into that a little bit later on. There are very detailed steps that you can take depending on how calm the person is to give different kinds of support. If their life or safety is in danger, that's a different level of intervention. Gotcha. And we will absolutely be coming, well, I guess when you open it for that, in terms of the questions, we'll be talking about how to support victims of domestic violence a little bit later on because I made a list of tips.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for us because I remember one scenario I was in one time where the same thing, and this shedding a lot of light on it for me looking back at it because you think somebody in the perfect relationship.
Right.
And everything good. They're much more settled than I was. I was young at that time and everything good. They just had a baby. Everything so perfect. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to check him one day and when I walked into the house, his girlfriend, I can't remember if they were married or I don't think they were married at the time. Or they might have been engaged or something. And when I was walking into the house, she kind of signaled me to come in the bedroom.
Right.
No, I started to get frightened one time, a little frightened.
Yeah.
I said, but I said, right in front of the man here, what kind of thing is this? Yeah. So I kind of tentatively kind of went in and looked, and then she kind of showed me her leg.
Right.
And it was black and blue. Mm-hmm. And she was kind of saying, so you see, all you feel all your partner perfect.
Right.
You know, because that's the one we look up to, that's the boy, you know what I mean? And I thinking about what, and I never say nothing to her. I didn't say anything to him because you don't know what to say. It's like, what do you tell somebody?
Yeah.
If you find out something like that.
That's a really tough position to be in, because then your brain kind of goes into safe mode, and you may not even be thinking clearly because you're seeing this terrible thing in front of you that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And so your brain switches to the back where you're probably now worried and scared and afraid.
Well, I was more like, I don't want to be... My thing has always been, like, don't get involved. Because this is between two early. Like you saying, call the police now, and I trying to flash back to that moment. I could tell you at no point I was thinking, call the police. I might have talked to him about it, but even as a friend, right, as somebody who in the circle, it takes some time for me to be able to tell somebody. It had to be a pattern, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and abuse is a pattern, eh? Abuse is not one time.
Well, for her to come and show me that, I had to think. I mean, now that I'm looking back at it, then I thinking this must be the first. There must be fallout or whatever they had.
Right.
And I doubt. I doubt.
Because that level of violence doesn't often happen early on. You know, and it's a bigger red flag if you get that type of violence early on, that your life is going to be in danger.
Yeah, it'll only escalate is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, it only escalates. Different types of violence. So intense violence, if there's choking, that is like next level, what is it, orange threat? Because anything around the head, the face, or the throat is a different level of fight. Yeah, because you can be brain damaged, you can be choked. The injury is severe and life-threatening in that area of the body. So, of course, we'd be concerned if they hit you on your leg. Of course, we'd be concerned, but if there's choking, that's orange alert. We're talking about life and death territory there.
Right. And, you know, my honest opinion at the time was, what I could have make of it was that you're doing that so other people don't see that you're hitting her. Because if it's on your, it was somewhere where she had to show, you know, I mean, you had to show me that it's there. Nobody can see that.
So is it really an anger problem, or does that sound like a deliberate choice?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
There's very much a choice. Yeah.
If it's anger and you fly off the handle, you're not going to have that amount of control in your response, I think.
To know where to hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, so let's get to some of those questions, because you had posted during the week some questions that people might want to ask.
Yes, and I'm so grateful. Most people actually sent it privately on a DM, which I appreciate and I understand, because it's a sensitive thing.
Right.
Now, some of the questions were about toxic relationships and not necessarily abuse. Mm-hmm. But I thought I would include them here because very often the toxicity leads to some form of abuse.
Right.
And I think we have to have an awareness of a toxic relationship if we have to understand an abusive relationship.
I think that's a good place to go. It's a good place to go.
So I think one of the questions would touch on this. Let me just give me 1 sec. Let me just run through.
Sure. Well, let me ask you while you're looking for that too. Mm-hmm. In just a toxic relationship, let's assume that your relationship is not abusive. Right. Not physically abusive or not threatening, as you had said, but is toxic, is unhealthy. Would it follow a similar pattern, or does it tend to where is a extreme amount of love in a very fast, short space of time? Same kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot in common, you know, like gaslighting.
Right.
Not taking responsibility for your behavior. I did the list, so let's go to the list.
All right, cool.
So here's a good one. Number 6, the 6th question I got was, how do you know if it's toxic or if it's just normal ups and downs of a relationship? This is a wonderful question. And again, this is where the assessment and the radar comes in, because the radar is broken and it can't tell, is this passion or is this toxicity?
Right.
So let's go through some of the signs of a toxic relationship. Now, if you're listening to this and you suspect that you are in a toxic relationship, I want to invite you gently to listen to this on your own. And please notice in yourself if your brain starts going, yeah, but that doesn't happen to me. I'm not looking for the ones that don't happen to you. I really want you to pay attention to the ones that are happening to you. That's one of the tricks to figuring out if you're in, because the natural human tendency is to deny an unpleasant reality.
Of course.
So let's just listen for the ones that are actually happening to us. So you're going to have this honesty, which may come up in different ways. It may be as extreme as hiding a whole other relationship or a whole other family. Or it may start off very small with just putting locks on everything on your phone. Gaps of time that you cannot account for, etc. So there's some dishonesty happening. Usually there's jealousy, and the jealousy is not only of a person. Sometimes it's to your family unit. Why do you have to spend so much time with your family? Sometimes it's being jealous of a career, especially during this pandemic when some people have not been able to keep their jobs because they've been fired. And the other party has been probably even progressing in their career. You may find some jealousy coming in there. Right? There's resentment. So if you try to bring up something with the toxic partner, they say something like, oh yeah, well, what about that thing you did 100 years ago? Let's talk about that. Okay? You find I was hiding on your phone. What about that time when you heard about the email?
Right.
6 months ago. So there's what we would call in plain Trinity speak a lot of toting happening.
Right.
You're having to walk on eggshells around the person. That is actually a huge red flag for abuse. From the time you start, you have to watch what you say. You have to watch your tone of voice. You have to make sure they're in a super good mood before you could say anything. That your red flag should start going off by then. Googling, am I walking on eggshells, is probably another sign as well.
Wow, people do
having to Google, am I walking on eggshells with my partner? There's usually a pattern of disrespectful words and actions, and disrespect shows up in so many different ways. Like they're consistently late. They're late and they don't apologize. They disrespect your parents. They disrespect your time. They disrespect your property. They disrespect your opinions. They put you down in front of other people. They laugh at you. Or they support you in public and then they're disrespectful in private. It's a huge red flag again when you have your partners switching back and forth between what seems to be different personalities when other people are around versus when they're with you alone.
Yeah.
Any kind of controlling behavior. Don't go out, wait for me, stalking the person on Instagram. You know, I saw you on Instagram this morning, but you didn't like the thing that I sent for you.
Oh my God.
I'm calling you and I'm seeing that you're online. Why are you not responding to my message? I've messaged you now 7 times. Making comments about what you should wear, what you should eat, who you should go out with, how to spend your money. Anything that's controlling. Gaslighting is one of the number one signs of a toxic relationship.
Gaslighting, you mean, just to explain?
Yeah, so I have a post about this. I think I'm supposed to have a post on my Instagram. Gaslighting is any technique that's used to deny a person's reality. So it would go like this. Say you and I were together and I started screaming and cursing you.
Right.
And after I'm done, I said, Corey, why do you keep screaming at me?
Why I keep screaming at you?
Yeah. Why are you using obscene language? I've never done this to you. How could you raise your voice like this? And then I burst into tears. Right? And so we're in November, and then December you bring it up. Neola, remember that time? I just want to tell you, I don't like the way that you were shouting at me. Me? That never happened. Boy, I was just joking.
That's something like a woman thing, if we're being honest. Is this how female, but this particularly something that women do? Men is gaslight too?
Oh, yeah.
This something like women alone, but all right.
You know, you're making things up. It usually goes like this, right? You're making things up, you're exaggerating, you imagine that I was joking. why you're so sensitive.
Right.
Don't take it so now, gosh.
All right, now it's sounding like men. Now it's sounding like men.
you do the thing, and then you ask the victim why they're doing the same thing to you.
Right, okay, it's something like men.
And this is so dangerous. It is so dangerous because over time you start doubting that you can trust your own perception. Because if somebody's that beating you on the head all the time and implying that you're crazy, eventually you start doubting. Did that really happen? Well, it probably wasn't, because they seem convinced that this never happened. So I must be imagining things.
No, let me ask you this, because that's sounding like a whole system of entrapment. Because if in the beginning I show you the most love that you've ever felt before, and then it starts slowly but surely deteriorating into this, right? And I find ways to separate you. You said like you would separate you from your friends. You can't go out by your friends or your family. So if I'm the only person you talking to, you are my only social outlet, and you start doing me this, I could see where eventually it could send you. I mean, doubting your own perception is a scary place. I can't imagine. That sounds like insanity to me. I don't know what.
Of course.
Yeah. I suppose.
Yeah. Imagine you beat somebody and then you deny that it ever happened.
Yeah. I understand what you mean. And if you're isolated, if you get isolated, that's the only person you're with all the time, then you have a real problem on your hands.
See, when they start controlling your thoughts and your mind, it's very much far gone. Especially if you have no other support to tell you, that's not true. That's not true. What you're saying actually happened. And one of the first tips, in fact, the first tip that I would say to support a victim of domestic violence or who's recovering from gaslighting is that you must believe when they tell you it happened. When you come back with, you're sure, you've just gaslighted that person again.
Wow. Yeah. You know, and that would be probably, thinking of it, that's probably my response. If I'm the outsider saying, and somebody comes, because the thing about it is be people who, I just hoping people who listen and understanding that when you're talking to the person, because I saw somebody post on Facebook the other day, and I found it to be really moving to me. She said that where we need to start is to get men to check their own partners and to have the conversation with their own partners about domestic violence. And I find it was a powerful thing, maybe because of my experiences.
Right.
But sometimes when you're lying with your friend all the time, you don't know that it's happening. Like, let me give you an example, right? Slightly different from that. But we had a neighbor by my mom, right? Even talking about this sounds so unbelievable.
Right.
He would, at the time I had, the business had expanded to Jamaica and I was over there for some time. And Zachary, I'm recording. Bye. I don't need any light. Thank you. Bye. Take it off now, Zach. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Okay, love you. Bye. This boy is something else. I need to get his strength off. He's just glad to hear when you record and he wants to come and say something. He's something else.
Yeah.
I'll fix that after. Yeah, but I was abroad at the time and I would come home often. I might be in Trinidad maybe 4 or 5 times a year.
Right.
And there was a neighbor who I used to talk to him all the time. You know, real good conversationalist, intellect, always up to date on current affairs. So I would before you will always time me. You know, people who waiting to see when they reach home to come out and talk.
Yeah.
And it was
one
cool.
of those.
Listen, I always talking to him. They're really cool. And then the neighbor behind us, in St. James our way, you know, the houses close together, and we were all up in this little alley. And she came and told me, she said, I noticed you've been talking to him all the time and that's your partner and thing, but you must talk to him, eh? I said, what do you mean talk to him? She said he's be coming out in the yard naked and masturbating all the time and watching me.
Oh my goodness.
Well, Neola, I say, what?
Wow.
I say, you sure? I said, nah, man, not so and so. I say, you sure? I could not believe, because again, the interaction with him, this man of a upstanding job, a professional guy.
He surely wouldn't whip his penis out in front of you, Corey.
Well, here now, the time came. As sure as the sun will rise, the time come. Because eventually now, when I say that, I feel in a way because I tell myself, but this woman feel everybody want, what going on with her? She feel everybody wants her or something. Then the husband come and tell, man. Mommy start telling me too that her husband and the guy fight and thing because, you know, so and of course I only did for a weekend or two. Now again in I ready to go because this is now my mother living by herself there and I starting to get worried. And one morning, boy, listen, and more people complaining about it. So now you're realizing it's a thing.
Right.
And one morning, I leaving early in the morning. That flight to Jamaica might have been leaving 6 or 7 or something. So I had to head out early. And this is 3 in the morning, and this man is naked in his yard, sweating. And I'm thinking, what?
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God.
And I call out to my girlfriend at the time, pregnant. I think it was. I saw him that morning and I said something to him, but I was heading out to the airport, so I just left. He ran back inside. Big guy, yeah? You didn't want to fight with him.
He ran back inside.
Yeah, you know, if he was small, this story would end a long time ago. But the fella bigger, so I had to take my time.
But you shouted out and you kept on going.
You know what I mean? But another time I saw him, this is the middle of the day. When I thinking of myself, I saying, but in this hot sun, sweating, why are you, this is enjoyable. And he looking at a lady way across the street. And I thinking, if my eyesight was so good, I would have used it for better things. I can't see who across there.
Yeah.
And when I tell him about it, he run inside and pawn something and come out like he want to fight. So when listen, he was something else. We had to eventually write and get a landlord who had owned the property where he was to get him to move. And the thing about him is that he knew he was living is like 4 or 5 houses very, very close together. And most of the people there are women, single women like my mother.
Oh, so he was in his glee then.
He having a time.
Yeah, he had a real time.
He done size up the next woman husband and say, well, they fight before, and like the fella couldn't overpower him. So he done realize he in control there.
Right.
So when you said just now, like that, the idea of gaslighting, when you're asking somebody if it's for real, it's so easy for us as bystanders, let me say.
Yeah.
To doubt, because when she told me that, I thought she was, I would have talked to her like that too. Like, you sure? There's no way. Until I eventually, and she was, I'm glad she was around to say, see, I tell you that. Remember I tell you that? I said, girl, I had no idea.
And here's the thing is that if we take them seriously, we don't have anything to lose, you know.
You know, that's true. That is a fact.
What's the harm in believing when somebody tells you they've been abused and victimized?
That is a fact.
You know, we behave as if we have this invested thing and denying them.
And you know, that's absolutely true, because me and the man good and everything, but I wouldn't stand by if these are the things he's doing. So you're right. You're right. I mean, and to be honest, if it was my mother who told me that, I would confront him immediately. So you're right. You're right. So the idea is to, when we hear things like that, to whether professional or just bystanders or friends, to
believe it.
Gotcha.
I've heard people say, innocent until proven guilty. And I always say, listen, until you're a lawyer trying this in court, stop it.
Right.
Believe them, support them. If you can't believe them outright, say, oh my God, this is a horrible thing. What happened?
Right, at least give
yourself a chance for the compassion to bubble back up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's important, because I feel like if I just on my own, not talking on behalf of all men, but just thinking about this now, my tendency, and you know what, if I suspected the person, or the person moves a certain way, it would probably be easier for me to just believe the woman when she said that.
Yeah.
But once that guy is upstanding, I think the social thing is a real thing. You know, if you upstanding, you have a good job, you're doing good, and
remember Bill Cosby? Remember that?
It's true. And he would have been the exact person who I say, well, you sure?
Oh my gosh, we grew up with Bill Cosby. He's so nice. I have one of my students say to me, because when it broke, I was still lecturing.
Right.
And one of my students was going on fighting in class.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you're not feeling sorry for Bill Cosby going to jail. He's so old. And I don't often put students in their place. I don't put rank and stuff on them.
Right.
But this is probably the one time I had to do it. I said, no, I actually feel sorry for all of the women's lives that he just completely destroyed.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And these women, when you listen to them, they went to the police gaslighted them. Didn't even bother to take the report. Their families didn't believe them, their friends, nobody. And they were never able to work again because Bill Cosby blackballed them.
Yeah, and even if he didn't, it would be so, if you accuse, when he was in his heyday, if you accuse him of something like that, I might just say, boy, let me don't work with this woman again. Well, she could come up with, if she could make up a story about Bill Cosby. Yeah. I could see how that's dangerous.
You know, and sometimes it's just a little common sense too. I mean, some of these women were very wealthy in their own right. What are they gaining?
Yeah, they don't want anything from him.
Exposing their lives and having their names dragged through the mud by these terrible people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we re-traumatize persons who have survived these relationships when we outright tell them, we don't really believe that story, no, that couldn't possibly be true. Yes, so let's give an A. Mm-hmm. If we don't want to jump to the defense and, you know, do the whole thing, let's give an A. Let's give an A.
Right.
And see what happens, right?
Makes sense.
So I'm going on with the signs of the toxic relationship. This is a big one. Lots of words, but they don't give any remorse or sustainable efforts at changing.
Oh, okay. So when you bring it up to them about the toxic behavior, there's no real change.
I'll change. Come, let's go out. I'll buy you a favorite drink.
Right.
Let's go to Tobago when borders open. We'll go to Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
6 weeks later, you're right back at square one.
Right.
Now, this is actually question 7. So let me read out question 7.
Sure.
Sometimes when I forgive and we work things out, he changes for a while and then goes back to normal. Mm-hmm. How do you know if to give people chances or just be cold-hearted?
Right.
Now, we have demonized boundaries and we've demonized caring for yourself and we've called it being cold-hearted.
Right.
So see, just the way that the brain is framing it makes you not want to do it because who wants to be a cold-hearted bitch, right?
Of course.
Nobody. So let me be nice. Mm-hmm. But these are the wrong words. The word here to use is, do I give him another chance or do I establish a boundary and show myself some love? Now, you know, when you ask it like that, you don't even have to answer it.
Yeah, it's true.
True. And possibly with a client, I would probably say, let's ask this question instead. What would you do if you poured half of that energy into your own boundaries? What would that picture look like? Because somebody who isn't changing at all and is just giving you words, that's not change. And we make a big mistake, not just in therapy or in abuse, but in life. We go with people's intentions instead of their behavior.
Yes.
But, you know, he means well and he loves me.
It's true.
But can I see how he loves you? Like, show me when and tell me how, when and where. But he said, okay, I know what he said, but...
Yeah, what's the actions?
I know her intention was good. Tell me about the impact.
So let me ask you this. In cases like those, what is it that I resolve this in myself? So for instance, if I you know, one of the things that just before I ask that question is that, like, listening to you talk about it, sometimes when you come to a therapist to ask these questions, sometimes you have the answers, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe you just want the guidance to get there.
Right.
But it's like, should I then, if I'm in a place where I feel it's toxic and the advice is to set the boundary, is it an ultimatum I'm giving the person saying, okay, this is the final time I'm going through this with you. You said you would change last time and if it's not changed, I'm leaving, and then stick to that? Is that what the boundary setting looks like, or is it something you resolve in yourself?
That's one way you could set a boundary.
Right.
And then there's something we call in therapy the so what question. So let me ask you this. So what if it's an ultimatum?
Yeah, it's true.
Why is that so bad?
Yeah.
Don't we all have a final straw that we pull and we have lines in the sand that you're not supposed to cross? So if you say don't cross this line again because I've asked you 4 times not to do it, and if you cross it again, I'm out. The question boils down to, when it happens at time number 5, will you stick to your boundary? Because the more you turn your back on that boundary, it gets harder and harder to leave and to have a healthy relationship. Because you're showing this person that there really is no boundary.
Yeah, I guess that's the truth about boundaries regardless of the situation.
Yeah. So then, I would always say, so what? So what if you put down an ultimatum?
So then you put down this ultimatum now, right? And you decide, because I get the sense from what you're saying that the abusive partner sort of knows how to turn on the charm, right?
Of course.
And how to act. So let's say that there's a period of genuine change. I guess the ultimatum is that no matter how long you change for, if you change back to this, we done.
Yeah. And then too, there's even, okay, so let's say in cases of toxicity, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a long-term sustained change and you decide you want to give it a go. No problem. Right. But in cases of abuse, being abused 4 times, isn't that enough? What's going to happen the next time? And so this is why I start asking my clients questions like, how long can you live like this? What is the last straw for you? So many persons with children would say, well, if he harms the children. Or they would say, well, if he chokes me or if he chokes me a second time, and then you get to, well, a third time and a fourth time. And then I say, well, what happens if you die? Because I've had to have those conversations. Sure. So again, there's different levels where your life and safety is in danger, and there are different levels where you're probably just dealing with a jackass.
All right.
But nothing is wrong with giving a jackass an ultimatum. Because your peace of mind is priceless. And this is where we go into some little deeper territory where somebody really doesn't think that their peace of mind is priceless. And that's what needs to be addressed. Because there are people like that, huh?
Well, can it be the case that if you're in an abusive relationship long enough, you could end up there, even if you didn't start off there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure where you start thinking that you start doubting your own value and your own worth. And
of course, yeah. Or it works the other way around, where you didn't value it much in the first place until you ended up there.
So that might answer the question as to why people move from abusive relationship to abusive relationship. Is just...
Yeah, so it feels at home. Mm-hmm. They have not addressed the real problem, which is the radar has been broken. Right. The brain is seeking that dopamine shot, that reward, and it will only come in an abusive relationship. When people leave abusive and toxic relationships, it takes a while in therapy for them to get used to a normal relationship, because that peaceful partner, the brain registers that as boring.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, because remember, you don't have that intense dopamine going off, right?
Right.
So the brain experiences this sudden drop in dopamine, and what's normal for you and I,
of course,
it reads in the abused brain as, this is very boring. Let me start an argument or go back to my ex.
Oh.
So it takes a while working with victims in therapy to get that brain back down to wanting and relishing and pursuing peace.
Right. So the next question, you had some other questions on your list.
Yeah, so this is a pretty good one. I have 2 friends who are in a relationship and they are extremely toxic and abusive to each other. What's the best way to bring up the topic with them? Because they have proven quite resistant in the past. Or would it be better to just leave them alone? Now, I'm guessing there's no need to bring it up with them because it's already been brought.
Well, the person means that they're friends, like they have friends, the 2 friends in a relationship.
A relationship, and they're abusing each other, and they want to know how to bring it up with them. But they also said they've been quite resistant in the past, which means that obviously it came up already. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I actually would not bring it up at all. Because it's already been brought up. Now, here's the thing. A couple moves on a different system than an individual. And a couple strives to keep things going in the couple as they already are. And that's how couples are designed. That's a whole system that's different from one person. Right. So if you're talking to an abusive couple together, you're basically one against 2 people.
You want to get what?
You're one person against 2 people.
All right, gotcha. Yeah.
And I've seen too many times you have this great talk and the couple cry and they promise to get help. Mm-hmm. And then a week later, they're telling everybody, well, Corey told us to break up. And I don't know what is his problem.
Oh, man.
He's jealous because he's not married.
Of course, yeah.
And so they join together and the third party now becomes the outsider. Yeah, so I wouldn't bring it up. Yeah, you become the enemy. I wouldn't bring it up at all. If one person brings it up with me, I would be very careful what I say in terms of holding information confidential, which is important when you're talking to 2 different parties about the same issue.
Right.
I would ask very innocuous questions with an end in mind. For example, how long do you think this can last?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see this going? And I would recommend individual counseling, not couples.
Right, yeah, said that. Do it separately.
So I would pretty much leave that alone, wait for one person to come to me, ask questions with an end in mind, and please see about your mental health. The person who sent this question in, it's very draining to deal with this all the time. And then every time they have an argument, they call you.
Of course.
They don't take your advice. You spend hours with them on the phone, and a week later, you're the problem.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot with couples because the couple bands together against an outsider.
Right.
So be very, very careful with that one. I would tread so carefully.
Yeah, I've never been in that situation. I mean, I've been in situations where I know one of the people, but I can't imagine. I mean, both people could be calling me now different times to say
multiply everything by 2.
Oh my God. And you have to be on eggshells all the time because you don't know what to say to this one. Wow, yeah, boy.
Yeah, like I probably wouldn't line too much with a couple like that. You know, I think there's too many things to juggle there. And that sounds to me like a very draining experience.
You know, the thing is, like, I've been in, well, I've never been where I knew the two, like, both of them were friends then. But, you know, there are times when it's like you and your husband meet another couple.
Right.
And where I say there's exactly what happens to me because I remember in one friend, boy, that is, we need a whole podcast to talk about that, Neola. That was something else, right? And they would be, they're both abusive, both at each other. But you know, it's so uncomfortable to be around them because they were past the stage where it was who trying to be nice. The thing when both of them linemen, the most fun people you ever been around. You're having a time. You'll never have such a good time. But listen, one little thing could happen in a fete. Oh my God. And the whole place could mash up.
All hell breaks loose.
Yeah, boy. So it's the same thing you're saying is good advice because eventually what I start doing is like, I'm not available. we linemen, I have no tickets. I can't go here. I can only get 2 tickets. It's like you just try to distance yourself, yes? Because you're right. It's your own mental health. Now you have to start a study.
I love to tell people this thing. I'm going to tell you what it is. And I feel like I have so much authority to say it because I'm a therapist. I actually had kind of a kick out of telling people this. But I tell people all the time, listen, you're not the therapist, you know.
Right.
Please, leave that to people like us.
Right.
Because, and then so I even have clients who I will terminate therapy with. If you're coming to session all the time, you're spending your money and my time, but you are really just coming and you're saying the same thing every time. You don't do the work, you don't do the homework, you have zero commitments to changing.
Right.
Now that's different from a victim who is really stuck in a trap.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, that's really different. Remember, they are victims and they're in a horrible situation. They can see no way out of it and they need the support. But things where you absolutely have access, you don't live with the person, you have everything available to you, the writing is on the wall, you refuse to do all of your self-esteem and self-care work, you're not a good fit for therapy.
Yeah, you're not ready to change yet.
Yeah, and not everyone is, and you're not ready to do the work, which is fine. But I can't keep taking your money in this scenario, so we're going to have to stop.
No, listen, that's an instructive thing you're saying, because imagine you're a professional being paid to do this and you stop it. And I am just a friend. I don't know nothing. And I try to take this call all the time to try to... You're right.
Don't do it. See about yourself. And you have a responsibility to be well, not just for yourself, but the people who love you, who are there.
Right. Makes sense.
So you don't have to do it. So I'll read out the last question, and then we could talk about green flags in relationships. So we don't only know the bad side, right? We know what to look for.
Perfect.
So this question, the answer is very short. Can you unintentionally be emotionally abusive? Because I think I was, and I didn't mean to be. So abuse is a pattern. It's not a one-off thing. It's done by choice, not by accident. And the very fact that this person is showing remorse and taking responsibility is a big sign that this was not intentional abuse at all. So if you're listening, if I were you, I would, one, seek to repair this relationship that you're talking about. and also seek insight into yourself to see what triggered this behavior so that you can view to end it in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Emotional abuse sound like women again, and Neola just saying it sounding like women.
No, Corey, we will follow it,
It's in sounding like men. Tell me what is emotional abuse look like? Like what would be a scenario that you're getting emotionally abused?
So it's like pulling you away from your support with the jealousy.
Okay.
Demanding but not giving, insulting, making the person afraid, making you afraid to question anything, to be yourself. A lot of gaslighting. They blame everything on you. If you bring up anything, you may be given the silent treatment. The whole conversation may be derailed to that time when you raised your voice and nothing is ever about me.
All right, so you're saying, but yeah, well then I guess it's not women then. That's the same thing I said about abuse earlier. So I suppose it's not going on the same road, keeping you away from your support system.
Emotional abuse is the number one predictor of physical violence in a relationship.
Oh, so it's not like a separate, it probably leading there is what you're saying.
Yeah, most of the time it actually leads, and the damage from emotional abuse takes much longer to heal from than physical abuse. Because it really, and I don't say this lightly, although it might sound dramatic, it literally eats away at your self-esteem and your soul and your mind and your mentality.
I could imagine.
Yeah, it breaks down, really breaks down the sense of who a person is. So at the first sign of gaslighting, my brain would just start going off immediately into red flag territory.
Right.
So let's look at some green flags.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Great green flags in a relationship. There's honesty. Now, it's not the type of honesty where it's brutal honesty, emphasis on brutal, because honesty does not have to hurt.
Okay.
There are very loving ways to be honest. And some people, they're quite vicious with their words and they disguise it with, well, I was just being honest. Again, your intention may be fine, but what was the impact of this brutal honesty?
Right.
When you can acknowledge the impact that you've had on a person, regardless of your intention, and you own it, and you make a committed effort at changing, that is a wonderful green flag for a relationship.
Right.
Joint decision making, you don't have one party making huge decisions for the other person unless it's like some amazing trip that you're planning as a surprise party. Right? For their birthday or something. It's going to affect us as a couple and have these ripple effects when making these decisions together. Two people in the trenches together fighting for a relationship is what you want, not one person.
Right.
You're down in there together, getting your hands dirty, inviting outside support in, like couples counseling. Or you don't have to feel 100% to go for couples counseling, but you're there and you're committed.
Right.
That's a wonderful sign. When each person feels heard and seen and validated by the other person, when each party owns their behavior, acknowledges when they're wrong, the efforts to change are significant and long-lasting. In fact, when you don't have to ask the other person to change for the benefit of the relationship, and it's a healthy change, well, I would say that's marriage material.
Gotcha.
Right? Listening to understand instead of listening to prove that you're right. Big green flag as well. And one of the top things I think we should look for in a partner is having someone who is self-aware. When you have to constantly lecture your partner about how to treat you and how they impact on you, I would probably say that's a no-no. That person should be able to say, I noticed when I did this, it really impacted on you and I'm sorry. Self-awareness is an undervalued and unsung trait.
Yeah.
But it's a huge part of a healthy relationship.
Well, you know what's real interesting about that list? Even the list with the red flags, right?
Right.
So much of it is so practical.
And common sense, right?
It is a little bit like a lot of times I guess with relationships, especially you know, meet somebody you like the person, we base so much of our decisions in that early period on emotion.
Right.
So, you know, even when you said we would talk about some red flags and some green flags, I was expecting to hear about like how you feel. Like if you're feeling the butterflies going anti-clockwise, then it's probably, there's a red flag. But it's so practical. It's like.
Do you notice it's all behavior?
It's all behavior.
Love is not a feeling. Love is not a feeling. It's measurable, identifiable behavior. Because feelings and romance fade over time, but committed behaviors don't change.
I think it's really sound advice because whether you're on the outside looking in at a relationship that may be abusive or toxic, or you're in one, I think there's a lot for people to ponder, a lot for people to think about here. And
it's a lot to chew on. If anybody's listening, so many people listen to the last podcast and they called me or they texted me. And I welcome all of those conversations. I think they're really great to have.
Yeah, I think especially on topics like these because I can't handle them on my own. And I don't think as non-professionals, as people, as lay people, I like how you said it. Yes, I am no counselor. So
yeah, you're not anybody's therapist.
No,
and you don't have to be.
And I go and say my answer now going forward is Neola said. I say, Neola said I'm not nobody's therapist. So I'm not even taking this call to even go down that road. But it's a serious issue because like for us locally here is based on the last conversation I had with Micah, who was a therapist as well, social worker. And she was saying that everywhere in the world you go, suicide is closely related to depression. But in Trinidad, the number one cause of suicide has to do with domestic violence and relationships. It's murder, suicide, and who the ones who to leave. And I mean, there's so many more discussions to have around this topic too, because like when I have some social workers from the ministry to talk to as well about the process and what exactly happens, because we didn't even get too deep into what happens when they have children in the household, because domestic violence affects everybody in that household. With children, it had to be something else. So we don't have about a few more episodes planned, but I want to talk to them in social work about what happens, because so many times you see these stories where women did the right, like they follow the thing that you telling them to do, to call the police, get protection, they have a restraining order, and then the headlines don't change, So I feel like we have a responsibility to just keep it in the headline. Let's make our own headline, yes, until we could see where the discussion leads, and hopefully it leads to both victim and abuser, or victim and aggressor, seeking the help that they need. I like what you said about seeking it separately too. For men out there, get your help. If people might have to ask questions, and Neola answered some about whether you're in a toxic relationship or you're abused. But listen, you're an abuser. You're practicing toxic behavior. You're not asking no question about that. So hopefully people go out and seek the help that they need to. So we'll see how that goes, and hopefully we're living in a better place sometime down the road.
At the end of it, yes.
Yeah.
So Corey, I'm going to look out for you in Maria's soon.
Facts, listen, I'm a South man.
Inside, not outside.
You can look out for me in Maria's in Tongue, and I'm South.
Yeah. I've never been to Maria's in Port Spain.
Oh, you see, Neola, you have a slight convent accent. So I have you down as every time I say I talk to you, St. Joseph Convent in my mind and Maria's and Polkaroo Street in my mind. Just so you know.
No, you have to switch that out. I went to Naps. And if you know, you know.
I know.
Yeah, so let's not go down that road.
Well, Maria's in South.
All the St. Joseph's ladies. I love you, all of you.
I'm sure. But yes, Maria's happening. We get the economy open back. At some point, we'll do this podcast in person.
Yes.
Good?
All right, Corey.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Right,
okay, bye.
Mm-hmm. So there it is. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope everybody has some takeaways. I'm really happy that we were able to discuss. Neola gave us some green flags so we know what we're looking for in partners. But the red flags there too. So the earlier we could see the signs, I think is the better we are, the better off we'll be, and the safer everybody will be. So again, I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you all next week.